My story is not based upon reading a book. It's not based on teaching. I'm a college professor and a coach and a journalist. My story and what I'm going to share with you guys is based upon something that I went through. Who knows what an NDE is?
Me.
What's an NDE?
Near-death experience.
Yeah. Who's had one in this room? Okay. I did too, 18 months ago. The last time I was in Porto was about, I guess, 4 years ago. I'm a big runner, so I love going. This morning I got up very early and went and ran along the river, and it was beautiful and it was inspirational, and it reminded me of who I was the last time I was here. I was still me, but hadn't been through what happened. So what I'm going to do today is talk to you about what happened and what I learned, and give you a framework for if you're ever in a bad place, how you can get through it. So before I get into the presentation, I'm going to give you a little glimpse of what happened to me. It was March 2024. I was on my dream trip with my daughter, who's now a sophomore in college, to the Canary Islands in Spain. If anyone's ever been, you know it's absolutely stunning. We did a couple of nights in Tenerife, and then we did a couple of nights in Gran Canaria. It was beautiful. I saw things, did hikes, met people, ate food that I had never had before, and it was absolutely incredible. While I was on the trip, I started having a tickle in my throat. And I was like, oh, it's a cold. And then it was like, oh, it's sore throat. So we went to one of, in Spain, as you all know, or in Europe, you can go to the local pharmacia and you can get some medication. So I did. But unfortunately, it got worse. And I got home. I live outside of New York City, as I say, New York Metro, basically Jersey. And I went right to the urgent care. And I thought I had bronchitis. Why are you here? I think I have bronchitis. They tested me. Yes, you have bronchitis. They swabbed me for strep. It was negative. 48 hours later, I was the sickest I had ever been. I didn't have any pain. My heart wasn't skipping a beat. I didn't have a throbbing headache. I was just having problems breathing. I was home by myself. My husband and daughter were looking at colleges because that's where she was in that college process. And I Ubered to the ER. I get to the ER, and I don't remember much after this. All I know they said was like, we're gonna have to put you on a ventilator. I didn't know what that meant at the time. 3 weeks later, I woke up. I was in a hospital bed. I had no idea where I was. The doctors came in when I woke up and said, do you know what happened? And I said, no. They said, do you know where you are? I said, no. And they told me. I had contracted strep A toxic shock syndrome, which turned into sepsis. And when I got to the hospital, I was very, very, very close to dying. My heart was at 10%. My body was going through something that they call multi-symptom organ failure. I was almost dead. I'm someone who goes to the doctor every year, gets her blood test, gets her mammogram, gets her sonogram, used to get her COVID shot, gets her flu shot. Okay, I do everything I'm told. I used to run 5 to 7 miles a day, play tennis a couple of times a week, go to bar class, you name it, I did it. And here I was, the sickest person in a 350-bed hospital. So I went from being me to laying in a bed, not being able to move because I was so overly medicated, not being able to speak because I'd been intubated for so long because I was so sick when I got to the hospital, they had to put me into a medically induced coma. And that's why I was asleep for 3 weeks. So what I discovered about me was this thing called resilience, right? I am type A on steroids, at least I used to be. Okay, organized, planning, everything had a purpose. I taught college, I did all this stuff. And then I was laying in a hospital bed, not doing anything. When I woke up and didn't know where I was and could barely speak, the doctor came in and kind of told me what had happened. Not everything, but kind of told me what had happened. And what I said to him was, what is it that I need to do to be back in that classroom in September? This was April 3rd specifically. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about now, is how I got there. So what we're going to talk about, so deep breath, I'm here, and that's the most important thing, okay? What we're going to talk about is what's leadership as it relates to resilience as it relates to leadership. We're going to talk about resilience as it relates to influence, trust, and performance. We're going to share some strategies, and I'm going to go a little bit more into what I just shared with you. So to quote Oprah, one of my favorite people on the planet, challenges are gifts that force us to search for a new center of gravity. Don't fight them, just find a new way to stand. And that's exactly what I did, right? I knew I was better than that person laying in that hospital bed. I knew I could get back to me. And it sounds so silly, but my inspiration for getting better was myself, right? I was pretty happy with who I was when I was in Porto 4 years ago. I was pretty happy with who I was the day before I went to the hospital. And then I wasn't happy, but I knew I could get there if I let myself. So what is resilience and why does it matter? According to the Oxford Dictionary, it's the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. It's the ability of a subject or an object to spring back into shape. Synonyms are toughness and elasticity. And let me tell you, I now believe I'm the toughest freaking person on this planet, although I think all of you probably rival me in that. According to the American Psychological Association, it's the process and outcome of successfully adapting to difficult or challenging life experiences, like we all have every day, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to external and internal demands. Why it matters? It transforms pressure into presence and presence into power, right? Helps us navigate volatility, helps us make decisions, and it helps with gender issues, all right? We're all tested every day. You know, all the stats you guys were talking about this morning about the amount of negative thoughts and all this stuff. Every day we all face those challenges. And every day we figure out, for the most part, how to navigate them, right? There's sometimes we get stuck. And what I always say to everybody is we're our greatest asset and we're also our worst enemy. And what I mean by worst enemy is we're the only person that prevents us from moving on, right? So when I was laying in that hospital bed trying to figure out how the heck I got there, I thought about who I was and I thought about who I wanted to be again. And so I figured out, I realized that I was the only one that could get me better. Not my husband, not my kids, not my mom, not my dad, not all my amazing girlfriends that came to my hospital bed. It was me. And I did it. So what do we know about resilience? And this is something I've thought a lot about. It's learned, it's not fixed, okay? And I learned that when I was laying in that hospital bed because every day I set little targets for myself, right? So when I first woke up, couldn't talk, I was so weak I couldn't even push the remote on the TV, for the TV, right? Because they hadn't fed me in 3 to 4 weeks because they didn't know what I could eat. So I was like, I don't know, 27 pounds or 30 pounds lighter than I am now, right? I was very, very skinny, we'll just put it like that. But I knew that I could move forward if I let myself move forward, and setting little micro goals, as I called them, was really important. And that's how I discovered my resilience that I really have. What we also learned is that networks and relationships boost resilience. I had so many people visiting me in the hospital. The nurses were like, when can we come in and take your blood? When can we come in and take your vitals? Because it was like a rotating group of friends. But it was those people that helped me get through what I did. We, women and guys, but women, slide here, we drove resilience from clarity, reframing, and community, right? All the women in the room, you know you have some great girlfriends. And they're so incredibly important in your life, and I learned that from my experience. Sometimes resilience, if we let it, can cause something called post-traumatic growth, right? It can help us transform as people. As influence, it builds credibility and trust under pressure. There's this great formula, influence equals trust, consistency, and recovery speed. And it says here, faster recovery depends upon meaning-making and micro habits. And like I said, I discovered that from when I was laying in that bed. And I really think it's a superpower. So Scott Moss says resilience is a leadership superpower of our times, right? And I know there are times when we're stuck, either professionally or personally. And some of you talked about this morning, about things that you do or things that you need to do, right? And it's so hard sometimes to let yourself move on. But we're the only ones that can, right? You know, you have that Saturday morning where you wake up and you've had a horrible week, or a Sunday night and you have a big presentation on a Monday and you're really scared. The best thing to do is just let yourself do it. Right? I was in Amsterdam yesterday at something called TechX. It's the largest tech conference in Europe. And I had to moderate a panel. There were 500 people in the audience, right? I teach public speaking, so everyone's like, oh, you should be fine. I was so nervous, right? And I'm sitting there taking deep breaths before I had to get up on the panel. And I said to myself internally, I'm like, I know I can do this, right? And I did it. And it wasn't scary. It was fun once I got into my groove. And it was all because I let myself, right? I let myself get over that fear. I let myself dig deep, discover my resilience, knew it would all be okay, right? And someone here earlier talked about, like, if something doesn't get done, you just say so. I love that, right? But I knew that yesterday had to get done, but I was able, I think, to realize that I got this, right? And we all have this, whatever this is, at whatever moment in your life it is, if you let yourself, right? We're all great at making excuses for why we can't. Why don't we change it and make reasons for why we can? It's a different way of looking at life. So as it says here, to discover your resilience, reframe setbacks, view them as improvements, respond, don't react. Offer yourself perspective and support. Resilience is a team sport with you, right? There's so much to be said for giving yourself space to think, right? Giving yourself space to meditate. We all have our ways of doing that, right? For me, I said I'm a runner. I start every morning, regardless of where I am on the planet, with a walk or a run, right? That's how I find peace. That's how I find calm. That's what I need to do for me to dig deep and to get through situations. We all have our ways of doing that, and I encourage you to discover even more of them, especially if you don't. So J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, we all know her story, or many of us do. Her rock bottom became the solid foundation in which she rebuilt her life. So a framework for resilience. And again, this is something that we can all use, but more importantly, this is something that we can share with other people. It's 4 letters, RISE. R is to reframe quickly, name the reality, and ask, what's the next move? Okay, so for me, laying in that hospital bed, it was a pretty bad reality. I'm not gonna lie, like, it sucked, okay? But I knew that my next move was to get better. Because when you're at the bottom, like the bottom, laying in a hospital, like, can't move, can't talk, you really can't get any much worse than that, at least in my opinion, right? So I knew that my next move was just to get better. And whatever the path was to do that, I was willing to commit to. Invest. What do you need? What are your daily check-ins, right? My daily check-in when I was in that hospital was with myself, was setting those micro goals, was just getting from one part to another of the day. S is for set recovery rituals, reset, schedule breaks, restate boundaries. When you're learning to get through something, when you're navigating your hardest challenge, you do you. You do it on your clock, not somebody else's, right? When I asked that doctor what I needed to be back in the classroom teaching, he laughed at first. You're not gonna do that. I'm like, oh yeah, I will. And I did. Okay? But I did it on my own time. And when I went back in that classroom in September, I said to my students, I really wanted to be here. And I told them my story and said, if there's anyone that doesn't want to be in this room, there's the door, right? I worked my ass off to get back to be here with you guys. And I want you to be here with me in a meaningful way. And I'll tell you, it's the first semester that in 16 years of teaching that no one dropped the class, right? I think they were kind of shocked by my story, right? But I used it in a way to motivate and inspire, and that's really what so much of this is about. And E, the last, is what did you learn? Extract that lesson. We all learn from experiences that require resilience, whether we like it or not, right? And I think for most of us, if we let it, we learn really positive things. Failure is awesome. Success is fleeting, right? I think success is actually acknowledging failure, right? I think success is taking those moments where things don't go the way that we want and learning from them, celebrating them, right? We go from little thing to little thing in life. Those are the moments you have to celebrate. You're all here in Porto. That's a success. Most of you were giving presentations. That's a success, right? One of the things I learned in the hospital was you've got to celebrate those moments because those big things are few and far between. And if you just wait for the big things, life can get really challenging. So celebrate the little ones. So ways to build resilience, values, right? What are your values? Just be decisions under fire. Define and implement recovery rituals, rest, move, disconnect. And as opposed to why me, what's next, right? I could have taken the path with my experience of why me. And I will admit I did for a little bit, right? And there are days now where I still say why me, but then I also say what's next. So this is if you're in business, this is something you can do with your employees. It's a leadership drill, right? For 10 days, spend 2 minutes daily with each teammate. Ask them, what's one obstacle? What's the next step? And how can I help, right? I'm at the point in my career where I've worked really hard and I've learned a lot, accumulated knowledge, I call it, right? And so I have a lot of female entrepreneurs that I mentor. And my question to them is always, how can I help you, right? What can I do for you? How can I share? So if you're a leader and you have team members, how can I help? And if you do that, if you take the time to get to know your people, if you take the time to be an authentic leader, if you take the time to be yourself and be human, you're going to get gifts and you're going to be rewarded by the loyalty of the employees and the success that comes with that team effort. So the benefits of being resilient and practicing it with people in your team: faster recovery times, improved psychological safety, trust, and better execution. The team is more successful. So, call to action for all of you. Pick one rise. Start to practice today. Teach it to your team. Teach it to yourself. Teach it to your kids. Teach it to your friends. Show it publicly and watch it grow and watch it flourish. And as so many of you have already said this morning, it's amazing when you put yourself out there, the benefits that come with it, right? It's scary to be real. Like, there are moments, I'm sure you've all had it, where you're like, I can't believe I said that, but you did. And there was something within you that let you say that. And then there was something within you that was like, okay, I did say that. I'm okay, right? And you're still here. And what you've learned is that by sharing things about yourself, people share things with you. And that's a gift. So, as I was telling you before about my little story, what happened, this is what I went through. 3% chance of survival. Doctors didn't know what I would live. That's the whole thing. 6 months, okay? It took me to kind of get back to where I was. 9 months, as I say, I was back to me. Here's what I learned. Resilience comes from within. Digging deep is required to find it, but you can all do it. At our hardest moments, and we've all been there, and we will all be there, we have two choices: curl up in a ball and cry, or move forward. And regardless of how tough something is, we have the ability to get through it if we let ourselves. Remember, we are our best friend, and we are also our worst enemy. We set the agenda and the timeline. Don't ever let anyone say to you, you know what, you should, it's all you, right? My Gen Z kids, you do you. If you have kids in the room, right, they say that all the time. You do you in the way that's meaningful and most important to you. What I've realized, life is short. Do things that bring you joy. You are your most important person. Do what you want, not what others tell you to do. If something excites you, pursue it. Celebrate the little things, as I said, because the big things are just few and far between. And probably most importantly, surround yourself with people that love and support you. because you know they've got your back. How I've changed. I've stopped trying to please everybody, and I focus on the people in my life that truly matter. It's funny when you almost die, because it's almost like you have a preview of your funeral, right? People show up or they don't. I had people show up in ways that I didn't expect, and there were people that also didn't show up. And some of them I purged from my life, right? They were takers, not givers. And in a moment that I was in like that, you need givers, not takers. I've also come to understand that people should appreciate you for who you are, not who they think you should be. And I've definitely gained a greater understanding and appreciation of myself. So, for my upcoming book called Gut Punch, this is something that I wrote. Resilience isn't about bouncing back. It's about moving forward with greater clarity, strength, and understanding than you had before. That's me. And I just wanted to say, in addition to the book, we're launching a podcast called Gut Punch. First season is actually coming out next week. If you are interested in being on the show, find me on LinkedIn, let me know. Love to have you. And the podcast is about what it sounds like, resilience and digging deep. And we're focusing on what happened, but more importantly, we're focusing on what you learned from your experience. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate you all being here, and enjoy the rest of the conference.